everybody, and welcome to another Top 5 board gaming video. Today I'm going to be talking about a very interesting category that really doesn't get a whole lot of attention, but one that I've been seeing not a lot more of, but I've found that I've been enjoying a lot more, and that is games that have programmed movement. So for those of you who don't know, what that essentially means is before the gameplay really starts, before you take actions or whatever it is, then you essentially say, like whether it's with cards or like miniature boards or whatever it happens to be, you somehow say, this is what I'm going to be doing. Now typically this is done simultaneously by all the players, and then you reveal in turn order, you'll reveal simultaneously, whatever it happens to be. But somehow you start off by saying, this is what I'm going to do, and then you reveal, this is what I'm doing. So it's really cool. There's a lot of variations on it. So obviously I'm going to be talking about my personal favorites, but there are a ton of games that do this, and really a lot of them that do it very, very well. Now, most of the games I'll be talking about today I have talked about before in various contexts, but obviously today this is specifically with the program movement. So with that, I hope that you enjoy it, and we'll go right on ahead and get started with my number 5. Kicking off our program movement list is a game that I actually do not own, but I have talked about several times, and specifically I've talked about this game in the context of the two camps of people where typically you either love it or you hate it, and that game is Robo Rally. Robo Rally is well, for me obviously it's a fun game. I really like the game, but the idea is that everybody is playing as a little robot, and you're on like a little map, and then you put down movement cards that say, you know, you go straight, you turn left, you do a U-turn, blah 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 blah, like all this kind of stuff. And the idea is that you're trying to reach an end point somewhere on the board. A lot of people hate this game for several different reasons. One of the biggest ones is something that happens with a lot of program movement games, and that's when people collide with one another, and what happens with that, because then it completely screws up everything else that you were going to do. Now for me, that's part of the fun. One of the other issues that people have with this is that if you play with a lot of people on a large board, it can take a tremendously long time. And when you first play the game, it's like you're playing it and you're like, okay, this is like, okay, I guess it's kind of cool, well, like whatever your opinion is on it. But typically you are not going to think, I can see myself playing this for 3 hours straight. No. I would not want to do that, but it is possible if you have a lot of people and you use one of the really big boards. So in that sense, I totally understand people not liking it, but for me personally, Robo Rally is tremendously fun. And the reason that it's lower on the list is because of the reasons I just said, where typically you have one of two camps. You have people who really enjoy it and people who really don't enjoy it whatsoever. But for me personally, I really like it. I think that the program movement works. I think it makes sense for the theme, because again, you're talking about robots. You're literally programming robots to move along the track how you see fit. But suffice it to say, Robo Rally is my number 5. At number 4, I've got a game that comes to us from Czech Games Edition, and it's one that I really haven't talked about a whole lot, but it's something that I really enjoy, and it's also very, very similar to another game that I'll also mention very briefly. The game that I'm picking, though, is Dungeon Lords. The one that this is very similar to is Alchemists, which is one of my favorite games of all time, without a doubt. So for Dungeon Lords, the idea of the programmed movement is a little bit abstract. I mean, you can make a better argument that this is really more worker placement than it is program movement, but for me, I like viewing it as a program movement in terms of the adventurer. So the idea behind this game is that you are literally a person building a dungeon, and as you are building it, then adventurers will come and try to just mess it all up. And it's like, no, don't do that. So you buy traps, you buy monsters, all this kinds of things to do that. So for me, the programming and the movement really comes from the adventurers, because you are able, once you get really good at this game, you are able to actually manipulate which adventurers you are going to get and which ones you're going to have to fight. It's something that takes a lot of finesse and can be very, very difficult to do, but it is absolutely very possible. And in addition, again, it is effectively this is more worker placement, and your workers, your minions as they're called, do just sort of sit on whatever action it is that you want to take. And on top of that, depending on how late you go in the turn, like if you're the first person to that area, the second person to the area, the third person, then you get different accolades, different rewards, stuff like that. Similar to Alchemist, which, like I said, is a very similar structure. And in that case, you're picking when you're going to go first. You're able to choose your turn order, and then depending on when you go on a specific action, you get to do different things, or you get different bonuses and stuff like that. So again, the actual programming aspect for Dungeon Lord specifically is a little bit abstract, but I personally really enjoy it. I love the subtlety for it, and it's something that more often than not, you're not going to hear programmed movement or programmed play or anything like that. But for me personally, I really like it. I think it's a fun game. And overall, Dungeon Lord's my number 4. Incidentally, lower on the list because it's so abstract. Because it's really weird, right? But suffice to say, it's my number 4. At number 3, I've got a really, really fun game that also doubles as a racing game. And on top of that, it's a game that is actually very, very simple to play and learn. And that is Bagwell. Gravel is a really, really cool program movement game, and the reason that I love this game so much is the way that the program movement interacts with one another. And because the way that it works is depending on what card you play also determines the order in which you're playing. So you don't automatically have like a first player, second player, third, etc., etc. It all depends on which card or cards you're playing and which cards your opponents are playing. And on top of that, but the actual way that the movement works is dependent on where the other things are, where the other players are, as well as what are called the derelict ships, the ones that are just sort of sitting there floating around that just act as mass. Because again, we're talking about gravity, and gravity requires mass in order to work. That's what it does. That's how it rolls. So it's a really, really cool game. I love the program mechanic. I love the fact that the game is so simple, because unlike something like Robo Rally, where you're literally like moving around a factory floor thing, in this case, you're just going on a single track, and that's it. That is the entirety of the game, and the whole point is that you either move forward on the track or back on the track, and that's it. Just solely dependent on your relative position to everybody else. It's a lot of fun. It's a great game. If you're interested, I actually did a full review and demo for this, so you can see exactly how it works. But again, I think it's very, very well made, something that's very easy to pick up and learn, just a ton of fun. Bagwell, my number 3. At number 2, I've got what is effectively really 3 games in one, because there are 3 games that one of them is sort of a extension of the other, and the other one is a re-release of the original one. I, myself, only have the original game, which is X-Wing Miniatures. In addition to this, we also have the Force Awakens edition of the X-Wing Miniatures, which changes some of the rules, adds different cards, all this kind of stuff. And then, of course, we have Armada as well. But suffice it to say, the entirety of the game is all about programming your movements. I love the way that this game does the program movements, because you have your little command discs, and you select what action you're going to take, and you put it next to the individual ships, all this kind of stuff. It is so cool. It is tremendously well done. Now, my personal problem with this is that this is see, the instructions fell on top of my ships, and now you can't see them. My biggest issue with this particular game is the fact that I don't have any of the expansions. Get back in there. It's not that I'm not necessarily interested in the expansions, it's just that I don't play it enough to make it worthwhile. And for Armada, it's even worse, because with Armada, you're talking about the relatively large ships and very, very expensive. But it's a ton of fun, and it is a very, very well done program movement mechanic. You can see similar stuff in the attack wing ones, where you've got D&D and also Star Trek attack wing, which use a similar mechanic to this one, but you can't beat the original. X-Wing miniatures, Star Wars Armada, these games, a wonderful example of very well done program movement, where essentially you're able to see the ships that your opponent is going to move, but you really don't have any clue exactly how they're going to move, or even if they're really going to move, they might just sit there and shoot you as well. So there's just all sorts of cool, like, sort of intrigue stuff that gets started with it. It's a lot of fun. Star Wars X-Wing miniatures and or Star Wars Armada and or Star Wars X-Wing miniatures, The Force Awakens. Collectively, my number 2. And number 1, I've got another game that unfortunately I do not own, but this one is a ton of fun. And it's something that I was really genuinely surprised by the first time that I played it. The game itself is Colt Express. This is a really very unique program movement game. It's kind of cool because you actually have props. You actually have a physical cardboard train, and you actually have little scenery things, which is kind of weird. But the whole point is that you're a bunch of robbers that are trying to go through a train, and you're like beating each other up, and you're shooting each other, and you're just trying to grab all the loots and things like this. And it's really, really interesting. I love the way that the program movement is done, because it's done in turn order, where everybody does an action in order, and then, you know, you do it again, and sometimes it reverses the order, sometimes you have to play the cards face up, sometimes you have to play them face down, so people might know what you're doing, they might not know what you're doing, all this kind of stuff. It's really, really fun. It is a tremendously well done game, and I highly recommend that you go out and try to play it if you haven't done so already. There's all sorts of cool stuff that you can do. Everybody starts with the same deck of cards, the same potential cards, but you only draw a set number of them in order to for each individual round. Each character has a power that changes how they work with either the way that they're placing down cards. One person actually gets an additional card to draw so that they can have more options for what to do. They use their actions in different ways. There's all sorts of crazy stuff like that. It's really, really cool. It's very easy to understand. It's a lot of fun to play, and without a doubt, the best program movement game that I personally have ever played. Colt Express, my number 1. Folks, that's it for me. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I know that program movement is another one of these relatively large categories for games, and I know that, I mean, as always, I have to pick just a handful of them. So as always, please let me know what your personal favorites are. Do you think that my favorites are stupid? I'm sure that you probably do, since I put Dungeon Lords on this list. What kind of person would do that? It's way too abstract. It's ridiculous, Danny. But suffice it to say, I do, as always, hope that you enjoyed this video. Thank you so very much for being here. I very much, as always, look forward to seeing your feedback in the comments below. And with that, thank you very, very much, and I will see you next time. Thank you again for watching my video for my top 5 favorite program movement board games. Again, this is a category that is fairly large, and I'm anxious to hear what you guys have to think about it, not only just about the category in general, but of course all of your personal favorite games. You guys know I'm always looking for suggestions of new games to play, and I love to hear what you guys have to say. As always, I've got several of my playlists linked up at the top of the page, and if you want to see more of me, then you can click on that big giant subscribe button. Plus, you can follow me on Twitter at DannyCGamingSci so that you can see when I post new videos as well as when I start live streaming video games. Thank you so much again for being here, and I will see you next time.